What's up, people? I am exactly on time, not late this time. Thank you very much. How's everyone doing? I have some funny stories to start off this stream with. I did MDMA last night for the first time in I guess more than a year, probably. It's a buddy's birthday, special occasion. And it was fun. Yeah. And then this morning, I had planned to have lunch with a friend, and so this morning, I felt a little under the weather because MDMA kind of fucks with your serotonin or whatever, and so you tend to kind of feel a little slightly down the next day, maybe, but it wasn't that bad at all. Actually, I only took a little bit last night, so it wasn't that big a deal. And in fact, actually, when I woke up, I did feel just a little crappy, so I smoked some weed, and then I just felt great immediately right after. And not only did I feel great immediately after that, I actually think it kind of, I have no idea if this is, neuroscientifically possible, but it actually kind of felt like the pot kicked in the MDMA again. Like I actually felt quite elated in a pretty stable way for several hours. Actually, the whole day had a kind of nice afterglow to it, I feel like, from last night. So that was pretty cool because I was prepared to feel a little crappy today. That's one thing. That's what I did last night and today. What else? Oh yeah, today I finally released this damn Nick Land podcast that people have been bugging me to get done and get released. I am sorry it took so long, but it was because I was putting a lot of time and energy into trying to get the audio as best as it could be, because we had some recording issues. So I'm very happy to report that's now available. You can get that on, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm also working on a text transcript for that. So what's cool about podcasts, is that you can generate a lot of ideas in communication with someone, and you can kind of churn out ideas more efficiently and more rapidly than you can often with paper or typing. And that's really productive and useful and efficient, and also just kind of fun and satisfying to produce ideas and make advancements in your thinking through podcasts and talking. The problem, though, is that it's hard to accumulate that. It's hard to remember it. It's hard to cite it. It's hard to track it. It's hard to piece together, different pieces of, if you listen to a bunch of good podcasts, it's a pain in the ass to try to integrate the different pieces that you might have picked up from different podcasts. So I feel like what you really need to do is make text transcripts, ideally, of your podcasts. That way you can search and move around text more easily in that way. So that's kind of, I'm experimenting with that. At least for this one, I'm going to be making a text transcript. A few people have already helped out do sections of it. But I'm also kind of I'm actually thinking about this as a much more general question for kind of like the nature of intellectual production today. What is the best way to, if you want to, seek truth and pursue ideas and be creative in your own intellectual way, what is the optimal way to organize all of these different systems, if you will, these different systems for producing, whether it be text or words or images and sounds or whatever. You have all these options at your disposal. What is the most efficient machinery to set up? How should you link these different types of platforms and formats in a way that maximizes your own, power, your efficiency in producing things and your creativity in producing things, but then also converting it to the other formats it needs to be in for other, optimal purposes or whatever. So yeah, it's really fun. I think this is very interesting, still wide open space that, young intellectuals of the world, should really be kind of thinking about, because I still think there's so many opportunities that aren't being fully figured out yet. In terms of as thinking about all of these things as not just communication devices, but as means for, intellectual generation and productivity. That's kind of ultimately what I'm driving at with my experimentation, using all of these different devices and platforms or whatever. So, right. What's up, Saturday's Child? Thanks for saying hi. I'm glad you've been enjoying the content. And you're very welcome for the work I've been putting in. I find this stuff so fun. I really do. And the fact that people are interested in it, I'm just, very grateful, very flattered. It keeps me going. It was funny. I went to talk with, I had lunch with one of my professor colleagues today, and he's a much older, more senior figure, very, successful, accomplished, actually, quite well-known and influential guy, actually, a political theorist. And we had lunch, and, he's kind of asking me like, how's your summer going? What have you been up to? What are you working on or whatever? And I had to kind of like think twice about how am I going to say this? Like, to the average academic, if I, that it would sound so strange to say like, well, the truth is I'm mostly focusing on my internet TV show right now. Like that sounds so ridiculous. Even, I mean, to me, it sounds completely insane even, but to the average academic who's not even familiar with this sort of stuff, it just sounds like a total joke. And who knows, maybe it is. Only time will tell, but I'm into it. So it's fun. And I want to keep going. Anyway, what's up with the rest of you? The only a few people in the room so far, but say what's up in the chat. I tried to make it, I was messing with the Nightbot settings, which is like the bot that I use to kind of help manage the chat a little bit while I'm talking. And I tried to set it up so that you can play songs. So if you know how to do that, I think the command is just exclamation point song or something like that. I'm still figuring this stuff out, but I think I enabled that. You could play with that. I have no idea how it works really, but that's one thing I was playing with before the stream. Anyway, what else? Tomorrow I'm going to be talking with a quote unquote decelerationist. You might have seen this kind of hashtag around the webs. It's also people who have trees in their usernames on Twitter. People who are basically kind of into like Ted Kaczynski and this critique of the industrial system. I don't know that much about that stuff, but I'm intrigued. So yeah, I figured the easiest way would be just to find someone who is interested in talking about that stuff. So Storm King apparently is someone that was suggested to me. Okay, I guess the song command doesn't work unless it's working for you in some way I don't understand. Maybe someone who knows Nightbot, who knows how it works, can help explain how that works. So yeah, I'll be talking with Storm King tomorrow, and yeah, he seems like an interesting dude. We've been DMing about some topics and stuff, and yeah, it seems like he has a lot of strong opinions about all the stuff that I've been talking about for a while. So, but from a very different perspective. So yeah, decelerationism, that'll be tomorrow. Right. So today we're going to be, in a little bit, I'm going to bring into the chat Mr. Kishore Budha, who is a academic in Britain. Well, he's a scholar and he was an academic for a while. I believe he's either in the process of, or he already has actually left academia. So we're going to hear more about why, he left academia. And I talked with him on the phone for like an hour a couple weeks ago, and he's a really interesting dude. He has a lot of really, fascinating kind of stories about his academic experience and just kind of the shit show that academia is. And he's very, very critical dude who's into, critical thinking and critical theory and radical philosophy. He's been very interested in the work of Zizek, for instance, and other things. And he's basically a left-wing kind of guy, but he's, I guess, in this much larger milieu of people kind of like me who just, have no interest in the kind of politically correct, like mainstream progressive, face of progressivism, let's call it. So yeah, we've been chatting, and now tonight we're going to actually air some of our dirty laundry as academics. I mean, I think if you knew the stories of what actually happens in academia and how the system actually functions, you would be horrified. But academics are very, tight-lipped about this sort of stuff, because they have professional reputations and careers and all that junk. So mostly academics don't talk that much about a lot of the, the details of like how fucked up the system is from the inside. So you kind of need to get someone who is quitting academia to, give you a kind of fresh eye and speak, someone who can speak honestly on that question. And I guess for me, I mean, I'm just a little strange because I'm not leaving academia anytime too soon. But I guess, as I've alluded to before, I guess I'm pretty content with like, if I just want to be free and say whatever I want. And if that means I can't be in academia, like if I get fired or something, or if it's just leads to catastrophe within my career, that's fine. I'll just deal with it. So in that sense, I've kind of made a decision to kind of spiritually retire from the academic expectations, at least for the moment. I still am doing research and stuff like that, but spiritually and ethically and in terms of my identity and stuff like that, I'm just on a vector headed towards like the most creative, interesting, autonomous work that I can do. And that's probably, as you've been watching. And as I think we're also kind of seeing already, it's already leading to pretty significant like inconsistencies with my identity as an academic. So it'll be just curious. I'm just curious to see how it pans out. I'm literally kind of like going through my own life right now as a kind of interested spectator. Like I'm not sure how all the stuff I'm doing is going to interact with my current academic career. But there's definitely going to be at some point, there'll be some type of explosive rupture. Yeah, I'll let the chips fall where they may. I'm not overthinking it. Okay, so the Nightbot chat bot thing does work for songs. You just do exclamation point songs, no space, just one phrase, exclamation point songs. And then I guess you type request and then the name of something. That seems to work. Now, who hears it though? Do I get to hear it? Or do only you get to hear it? Can someone answer that? Anyway. All right. It's 8:12. Bring in Kishore in about 15 minutes. What else do we want to talk about? Right. So actually, it's a pretty natural segue from what I was saying just a minute ago. Oh, the YouTube video ID. Okay. I'll have to learn that later. Whatever. Man, seeing myself in this video, I realize I need a haircut. I'm like all over the place. This is like the only time I see myself in the mirror when I'm doing this video. I guess I could look at myself in the mirror in the morning or maybe start brushing my hair, but yeah, just generally don't sometimes. Right. What I was saying before about how all the stuff I'm doing is probably going to at some point have some sort of like serious ruptures with my academic career. Actually, there's already been one little sign of this that is quite relevant to maybe the stuff I'm going to be talking about with Kishore, which is that I forgot if I've talked about this. I don't think I've talked about this. I got an email a few weeks ago from a pretty like high-ranking person in the administration of my university, basically telling me that I was being charged with an ethics violation, that my research conduct violated ethics regulations. And it was like pretty stern and seemed to be, trying to intimidate me quite a bit. And they CC'd in like high-ranking deans. So I definitely took it as like they were trying to really send a strong signal. And what it was for was one of my blog posts on my personal blog on jmurphy.net, specifically the blog post about the ideology of Kekistan. Apparently what happened, this is what they basically said in an email, is that someone, hey Matthew, what's up? Someone complained, sent in a public complaint, someone in the public like lodged a complaint with the university, basically asking them like, did Justin Murphy have ethics approval for this research he conducted on Kekistan? I guess presumably because it's, politically divisive. I mean, I don't even think it's that politically divisive, but lots of people do think that Kekistan is like this evil alt-right kind of den of racists and misogynists. And there's definitely some of those, but my research shows that actually it's not primarily really racist or misogynist people. It's primarily just for the lulz. And as anyone who actually is anywhere near that community knows that, and that actually my research shows that there is some good evidence to believe that a non-trivial minority of the people in Kekistan are actually left-wing individuals. And so that's just a one data point in my argument I've been making for a while now, which is that, what people call the alt-right is not even alt-right. It's a fair number of people in that community are actually leftists who have defected from the current kind of politically correct face of progressivism. Yeah, so I find some good support for that argument in the Kekistan community. My data shows that, I think, pretty clearly. And that's what the blog post was about. And, people are crazy nowadays. So that probably upset someone. They lodged a complaint. And as a result, basically, the university is trying to, where this all went was that the university said they want me to take my blog post down. That was their request to me. And obviously, I ignored them. There's absolutely no way I'm taking my blog post down for some sort of request like that. I would gladly be fired before I submitted to that kind of like ridiculous, stupid, humiliating kind of control of my own personal intellectual pursuits on my own personal blog. It has nothing to do with the university. It has nothing to do even with, it's not an academic article. I didn't use any university money. I didn't use any university resources. It's just my own personal interest. And it's all public data. You don't need to ask for ethics approval to analyze data that's publicly available on your own personal blog. That's just like really stupid. Clearly, obviously, they're just worried about liability. They're just kind of freaked out about, oh my God, someone's sending a complaint. That probably never happens. So they got that. They probably freaked out. And then they were like, we have to do everything we can to minimize the liability. So send Justin an aggressive email, kind of intimidating him or whatever. But no, there's no way. So I just ignored it basically and sent an email to the union and said, what do you think about this? And I'm basically still kind of waiting to hear back from them. But in the meantime, honestly, most things in academia, everything's so sclerotic and moves so slowly that, even if they really wanted to drive this issue hard, it would just take them, a long time to even be able to do anything. So yeah, I'll keep you posted on that. But it's already, as I'm saying, it's an example of how this stuff that I'm doing creatively on the internet, basically bypassing like all of the academic channels that this type of stuff is usually channeled through by academics, is already leading to frictions and issues. So it's probably, that kind of stuff is probably only going to get worse over time as I continue to do this sort of stuff. So hopefully it won't. I mean, hopefully, I think there's also a perfectly good chance that, I could do all kinds of crazy shit on the internet for years and, like no one will even notice, like, or maybe, maybe, I don't know. We'll find out. All right. I'll keep you posted on that though. It might turn out to be an interesting saga. Hopefully it won't, but, yeah, someone said in the chat, Antoine, right? If I got fired, I could make a big whole event about it. That's true. I mean, I'm not the type to like play up that sort of thing purposely, but that is something that I thought about. And that's one of the reasons why the internet is so cool, is because, you kind of can use it as a counterbalance to the ways that institutions can kind of hold you hostage, especially nowadays. So it's like, if you have a cultivated web presence, even a small one, but just the basics of, website and presence on one or two platforms or whatever, if you ever get fucked too hard by, the institution that you're kind of embedded in, you can, there is always this sort of dynamic that happens where like the somewhat sensational, drama of like stupid, irrational institutions causing scandals basically can kind of be converted. It has a way of sometimes converting itself into extra institutional social and cultural capital. So yeah, I mean, that can be a trap if you're like trying to garner that, then you can just be corny or whatever. But I see it as just I do think about that. Like if the university tries to stick me with like ridiculous claims, like this sort of ethics claim, like if they're really going to try to force me to take down my blog post and they're really going to push hard on that, you're damn right I'm going to talk about that on the internet, and I'm going to, I would do whatever I wanted to do to, yeah, basically counterbalance it through this like alternative form of social critique and intellectual reflection and yeah, cultural politics. So yeah, I think about that. It's a good point. All right. And actually, while we're on that topic, so long as that kind of mechanism holds, that's going to be one of the vectors through which, traditional legacy institutions such as academia that are based on like old gatekeeping models that don't really even make sense anymore, like those models are going to be increasingly broken down and disintegrated precisely by this kind of mechanism. Because, lots of people look at someone like, Jordan Peterson or whatever the case might be, and you can kind of see the game theory. Like that's a general principle that's going to be available and apply to people in a bunch of different domains. The general principle being, like if you really think strongly about something and you're willing to, take a stand on something that you believe in within an institution, even though that stand might be, highly discouraged and even potentially, punished or whatever, the internet is this kind of escape vector or exit vector in which that stand that you want to take can kind of convert itself into its own alternative, whatever you want to call that, like its own alternative structure or community. A community emerges around that, and then if that sort of basic phenomenon is available in principle to lots of different people, then progressively, incrementally, you're going to find more and more people riding that vector out of the mainstream institutions, I think. So, yeah, what else? It's 8:22, so we'll bring in, I told Kishore I'd send him a link at 8:30. What do we want to talk about for the next 7 minutes? Right. Well, one thing that we can talk about is it's really fucking hot in here because, well, one, it's summer, but two, I have these big ass lights. If you could see them, it's like this massive IKEA light, one of those like Chinese lantern type lights with the white kind of bulb, big white sheet thing around the light, and it's pretty fucking hot. Gives good lighting. I think the lighting is pretty good. Would you agree? And then I have also one here on my side, and it's also hot. So I need to work out a better arrangement as I've been talking about this. The light, I think, is about as good as I could hope for. But what would be really dope, which I'm really thinking about, is like maybe redoing this whole room just to make it kind of cool for podcasting. Am I a bit overexposed? Yeah, that's true. I'll work on it. Whatever. Justin, what music do you listen to? That's a great question. That'll help me fill in some time before we bring in Kishore. I'm not really big on music, to be honest. I'm not like good at talking about genres and stuff like that. And I don't have very sophisticated tastes. I would say, for the most part, I listen to like a few different types of music for a few different types of purposes. So for doing work, if I'm writing or whatever, I'll listen to like classical or kind of like ambient, like kind of posy, electro kind of ambient type stuff. Is what I tend to like. What would be names like, people like Brian Eno, but also like more. I kind of like the more like upbeat, positive stuff like Mount Kimby, and these are like I don't know who these people are. These are just like names that I've learned on Spotify as types of music that I like, or like Bonobo or whatever. It's like I don't find it like too aesthetically, significant or interesting, but as just kind of like pleasing background sounds to do work too. That tends to be what I gravitate towards. Then just for fun though, I like Drake. He's kind of my favorite. I listen to him all the time. I like kind of noisy, like experimental noise music, but like poppy, kind of more harmonious, or melodious, would you say? Yeah, like easier listening, kind of like melodious, experimental, noisy pop type music. So like if you've ever heard the band Shoo Shoo, like XIU, they've always been one of my favorite bands. Jamie Stewart, and also like stuff like Crystal Castles. I've always listened to that kind of stuff a lot. I really like, like Grimes and stuff like that. So yeah, like upbeat kind of electronic, somewhat noisy, experimental types of stuff. What else? Other than Drake, some Kendrick Lamar, some of the, yeah, like I listened to some of the good rappers. And what else? I recently, well, what I often do is I just have on Spotify, I have like a list of, how you have like a list of favorite songs, and they're all just like totally different songs that I've heard at different times that I've liked. And I just put them on this one big list, and they make no sense together, but I just hit like shuffle and listen to them all one after another. I do that a fair bit. Yeah. As I said, I'm not big on music. I'm not really good at talking about it. I don't understand it that much. And I don't really understand the genres or how you are supposed to describe things. And I also just don't care that much about it. Sorry, that's kind of a lame answer, but I'm just shooting straight with you. All right, some suggestions in the chat there. Thank you. I'll look into those. All right. I think what we'll do is, usually takes them a minute to kind of get into the room and get set up. So I'm just going to go ahead and give Kishore a link now. And he'll be joining us any minute. Where are you at, Kishore? I wonder if he's listening to all this. I wonder if he's listening to all this and he's like, why is Justin talking about all this random shit? Is he expecting me to talk about all this random shit? No, don't worry, Kishore. If you're listening, we're going to have a good, focused conversation about adult things. Yes, you are. As I said, I'm just warming up the crowd. Just a little prep talk, pre-talk, pre-game talking. All right, I sent him the link. All right, there he is. Hi, Kishore. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Maybe could you turn up your mic a little bit?
My mic. Let me just check.
Actually, you might be fine.
I think I'm on my microphone looks okay.
Okay. Yeah, you sound fine to me. Yeah, good. How you doing today? You all right?
I'm good. Thank you, and thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to talking more about all the things we've kind of laid out on the agenda.
No, but I was just taken aback by your sort of sensational news about your travails with the admin and your bosses.
Okay, did you get that story? Yeah. Well, that's a good jumping off point then for everything we're talking about. What did you think about that story?
Yeah, I thought this is really it's just incredible. I mean, for an institution that talks about freedom, right, about academic freedom, multiple truths. I mean, we are now currently in this massive intellectual churning around truth. Right? And then we are being asked, oh, you're not complying with certain notions of what is right and wrong. I mean, I find that absolutely fascinating, especially when we push the idea of the private. I mean, this is your private enterprise, right? This is in your own time after 5 p.m. legally. A university can't touch you.
Right. Yeah.
Right? So if you were doing this during between 9 to 5, then yes, okay, they may have a case. But then, of course, would it be sort of applicable if you were doing this during the lunch break, though? I think it might be worthwhile testing the sort of legality of these frameworks.
Right. Real quick, someone in the chat just asked, Tracy asked me, he missed the story, so can I fill in the story real quickly? I'll just repeat it. It's that I got an email from a pretty high-ranking administrator in my university telling me that one of my blog posts on my personal blog was being charged with an ethics violation, and it was like very seriously worded. They CC'd in other like high-ranking deans, and after some clarification, I got from them the specific request that they were asking me to take down my blog post. and it was, you know, completely public data, completely personal blog. And so it's just I mean, it's completely almost nonsensical, really. I think anyway. So my sense is that they're not really going to push it, but it'll be interesting to see if they try to.
And I just wish you had shared this with me earlier, because there's a story last year. I think an academic had written about his employers, or I think about his employers in THES, and this was about freedom of speech. And with no sense of irony, he received a notice from HR precisely about speaking to the press. And he said, "What part of my piece didn't you get?" You know.
Right. Well, yeah. Go on.
So I mean, it's quite interesting. Is that we have these po-faced kind of these administrators, and also you have academics who have become these sort of administrators now, you know. So I don't think there's this neat divide between administrators and the professoriate.
Right. You know? I agree with that. Maybe, Kishore, what we might want to do is, would you mind maybe just giving us a brief little summary of your own story?
Yeah.
And how you've come to me, you know, now today.
Yeah. Okay. So while I was in academia, I always called myself an accidental academic.
But you're not in academia officially anymore, or
no. So 30th of June was my last date. I'm now self-employed. I work right on my own with some fantastic people. You should have them on, since you talk about technology. You know, so Paul, Danny, my colleagues, they are absolutely brilliant people.
Okay.
And so if you want to talk about the frontiers of technology, because we're kind of at the applied space of the internet, you know, of digital technology. So there's a lot. Paul contributes, is kind of highly sought after by the media. Danny has done work across banking, government. So
I kind of interrupted you. Carry on with your own personal story.
I kind of got into sort of academia more out of serendipity. I'd taken a sabbatical. I started off as a chartered accountant, and then I got terribly bored of that job. I said, "Come on, life has to be more sort of interesting." I then sort of trained to be a journalist. I sort of taught myself journalism. I kind of worked as a freelance journalist, working on development and health. So these were the sort of stories I was covering. Then I got picked up by one of India's leading sort of anti-establishment newspapers.
Okay.
And I worked with them for a while. Then came the internet boom in '95. So '99, I set up my own digital startup. Did that for about a year and a half. Then exited. Things fell apart. Then I kind of got into change and knowledge management in IT. So using my expertise in digital startups to sort of work with IT companies. And it was the time I had my kid, and there was this terrible sense of, gosh, I'm kind of holding this kid in my hands. And I think I'm a complete idiot in the sense I have no idea as to how the world works, and there's this tremendous sense of lack. And I said, okay, I need some sort of education. I took a sabbatical, did my master's, This was in the UK, and I'd moved from India to the UK. Did my master's, loved the experience. We had some fantastic training, lots of political economy. So that kind of got me sort of interested, and it was genuinely kind of interdisciplinary. And I said, you know what, I would love to kind of do a PhD. PhD was a bit of a, I think I had too much fun than studies, you know. And it was the time I sort of got exposed to Zizek.
Ah.
And I was part of the team that founded the the International Journal of Zizek Studies. I was a PhD student. I was helping Paul Taylor, the founder.
Okay.
We brought him to the UK, to the north of England. We had a great sellout tour. You know, it was fun times. And Zizek kind of got me sort of interested in this trajectory, which we are now in. You know, we are kind of in that thick of that mess and the flow. And then but then also during the PhD, I got this exposure to what academia is. It is just as shallow and as banal as the industry I thought was shallow and banal.
Do you want to tell us more about like some examples? Like what are some of the best examples you can remember of having that insight?
Yeah, I mean, so this is a friend of mine who was doing his PhD in another sort of institution, and he had won some small Intel grant. So he himself was an Indian, and this is a professor who would pound his chest and say that I'm a communist, I'm a Marxist, I'm leftist, you know, and it's all about people, you know, this massive sort of performative kind of aspect of, you know, the caring left. He used his research grant to travel to India. Okay, took him with him because he had to, else this would be classed as a fraud, right? Mm-hmm. And he stayed in a 5-star hotel, and this kid stayed in a lodge.
Yeah,
and that to me was that moment of the awakening.
Right. A lot of people don't understand that for academics, like conferences are kind of a scam. Like conferences are basically just a vacation perk.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's like academics are allowed to go on vacation with other academics in hotels and see their old drinking buddies and get away from the wife and kids or husband and kids and for a few days. So and usually in a beautiful city. Or a beautiful country. You know, I think it's funny when you hear about like research workshops that are on like Caribbean islands and
absolutely.
Yeah, it's funny. So it's like and you know, when you actually go to any of these conferences or workshops, it's like an extremely small amount of work gets done. And you know, even like the conference papers, you get to talk for like 5 minutes. It's all very rushed. So it's like there's absolutely no defense of academic conferences as they don't even really pretend to be about any type of like intellectual progress. Like you only get to talk for 5 minutes, and then it's like this kind of factory, this short chaotic factory of short shallow speeches. There's no time to really follow up. There's no time to have long deep dives into anything, and also everyone's like really stiff and professional, so it's like just competitive like career maneuvering really. And then for the most part, like the real benefit of going, the real reason people go is because it's basically like a little holiday.
Yes, it is.
And you have fun and extraordinary sums of money are spent on basically like a vacation perk as like part of your salary.
Absolutely. And then you have there's this whole pecking kind of order. Who is the sort of alpha male in the field? You know, you'll have crowds milling kind of around him, right? And as we know now, there's some physics, someone in the field of physics, that young female researchers they created this private message board.
Mm.
Which professors to kind of avoid.
Oh, right. I think I saw that. Yeah.
So
creepy old male professors who have a penchant for groping and being sleazy, right?
This is we are now getting into the absolute underbelly of the beast. I mean, of course, I'm not saying that this is across the board, but it suffices to say that the academy is fragile enough to have such mold grow. It is damp, it's dark. You have these corners where this mold and fungus can grow. I've known of, I won't name names, because this isn't about a university. This is about the system, and you're not outside of the neoliberal system. Right? Let's be very, very clear about it.
Mm-hmm.
So you beating your chest, making all these claims, it is just ridiculous, because your entire kind of economic system, we'll kind of get into the details of how the sort of modern academy works, right? Because I think it's kind of important to get into the meat of things,
Sure. Yeah, you should say more about that if you.
Else it just sort of ends up becoming gossiping session, and then and you'll always have, oh well, those are kind of odd cases. My argument is that, well, actually, yes, there are odd cases. I'm not claiming that you have these rapists. I mean, unlike the Guardian. I mean, the Guardian had last year ran this campaign that there's a rape epidemic in British the universities. I don't think so. I don't think it's. I mean, Guardian would have its own sort of agenda, but hey, But I think it suffices to say that the system is not immune, right? This is not some kind of a disinfected room,
Right.
Right. So I think there's the academy has unfortunately come to now sort of epitomize the worst excesses of neoliberalism, which is managerialism.
Okay.
Right. What we are witnessing here is essentially managerialism.
And what do you mean by that? Expand on that, if you would.
Is that it sort of goes back to and I know a lot of my friends on the right will be upset, as will be my friends on the left. Is that since that we have viewed people as a mass, haven't we? Right. This has been the product of the Enlightenment, right? And that also coincides with rational ways of thinking, right? So we have been trying to kind of bring that rationality into sort of efficiencies. So it starts with efficiencies. So we start looking at the sort of natural world from the point of view of the efficiencies. Then we start looking at society sort of in itself, and then we start looking at and of course there's the sort of intersection of big capital, not entrepreneurialism. And I think this is where we can sometimes get mixed up here. It isn't capitalism as much as it is big capital.
Right.
And the universities have been very from the beginning of time. So we're talking about post kind of post Oxbridge phase of the expansion. It has been linked with big capital, with the expansion of capital, right? And with the expansion of capital, we see the advancement of managerialism, which is then sort of embodied in Frederick Winslow Taylor, right? And we're seeing that now kind of accelerating. So now you have universities having sold bonds. Bonds have been sold. Just go and search on The Guardian, the universities' bonds, and you'll get tons of the reports, right? So now their customers are kind of asking for the returns, right? And those bonds have been sold on the basis that you'll have an expansion of student numbers.
Right.
Now, to expand student numbers, you've gone ahead and you've built these swanky campuses, news. I mean, again, isn't it quite ironic that if you go to all most the universities today, they have the same very banal looking thin kind of aluminum cladded buildings.
Yeah, it's like the same person designed all of them. You get the impression. Yeah.
Go anywhere. Go to any campus. Go to Manchester. Go to Liverpool. To John Moores. They're all the same. They all look the same. And isn't it quite interesting that it's the same cladding, the same style and type of cladding, which probably was used in Grenfell. Right. So we see this kind of this industrial sort of acceleration, and so the logic out here is that we can bring in huge student numbers, which will pay for the bonds, right?
Right.
And we are going to get academics to get their own to pay for their own wages through the research grants. I mean, here's a simple test. Go to any department and ask, what is the pressure on you to bring in research income? Right? And we all know that everyone is expected. It'll either be through a démarche, you'll be told, or it'll be through subtle manipulations about how it is good for you and how it's good for your own career progression. So there's all this thing around surplus value, which is talked about. Right? Well, the logic here is simple. So the academic brings his or her own money, right? Pays for himself or herself, or these days, we should be politically correct. So for themselves.
Sure.
And the student fees is your surplus. Right.
And also, what a lot of people don't really think about or understand is that, universities are actually these like big investment funds, really. And in particular, like they're like real estate businesses that just happen to have classrooms and kind of, throw a little bit of money to sustaining these little classrooms. But for the most part, their real interest is like buying up all these properties. And, you go to the average like university town or university city, and like most of the land is owned by the universities.
Right.
It's funny.
Why are the universities investing in student accommodation? Right. Because if the whole point here is the triple bottom line, right? So the economy, local ecology, and local government, right? This is your standard kind of line which is used, and all academics will swear by it. Yet they will mutely watch as these swanky kind of apartment blocks are being constructed, when you could actually be creating income for local landlords, right? So that money could be going into the local economy, right, et cetera, et cetera. So it's quite interesting how they're kind of hoovering up. So in this quest for the surplus income, for the surplus value, so therefore you end up with master's courses that have got 300, 500, 600 students in a classroom. lecturers come in, give this mass lecture, and then you have seminars being conducted either by teaching assistants or by PhD students who are paid pittance, right? So you see this. I mean, this is what this is about.
Mm-hmm.
This has got nothing to do with. So the question out here is, how do you then get students in? So you then play this game of, oh, we are number one in research, right? So and then you kind of put pressure on academics to bring in research publications. So again, if someone was to just do a dipstick study, right, which would be empirically quite valid, I think now the pressure is 3-star at a minimum, right? Which then leads us to the other thing around the scam, which is how are these ratings made,
Right.
Right? What are disciplinary boundaries? Who sets the boundaries? Right? What is a 3-star research? What is a 4? I mean, this is I'll give you. So there's an academic friend of mine in a different uni, studies law. Sorry, he teaches law, and we were talking about. So we were connected on Facebook, and this was during just after the Grenfell disaster.
Mm.
And I said, you know what? And then everyone, oh, this is racism, pure and simple. I said, come on, it is, the problem is much more deeper. It is all about local government, how contracting is done, how local housing is provided for, so you can't just have this tribalistic view of politics, and especially not from someone who is a professor of law, and give it a break, mate.
It's just so easy, it's so simple and so easy.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and you would expect better from academics, but
and I said that, look, I've worked in the field of design, okay, and I can tell you this, that the decision to use that cladding would have had many layers of decision making, approvals, etc., right? But I don't think a committee sat down and said, yeah, you know what, let's burn these people in, and then this is a shallow debate. We're not researchers, we are not practitioners in the field of construction or local government.
Sure.
His question, but his retort to me was, do you have a 3-star paper in this field? So he had internalized this to such an extent, that he can't even have a normal conversation,
right,
without invoking all these status markers. You see that?
Right.
And I was thinking, isn't this really interesting? Now, having said this is not a problem unique to the academia, right? Either this issue of status, this pervades right across the world.
No, of course it's not unique to academia, but I think the reason it feels kind of extra perverse in academia is because academia is supposed to be the people who are seeking truth. I mean, that's why all this stuff has such an extra creepy vibe to me. Like when I encounter the deeply perverse, phenomena that characterize academic life today, it feels extra creepy and extra just fucked up precisely because academia has pretensions to being something better than, typical vulgar, manipulative, exploitative, capitalist culture.
Absolutely.
So that's why I think it's so kind of scandalous, really, if people could see inside of it.
I mean, isn't this sort of interesting that they've used the rule book of research, or not the rule book, some made up rule. This is exactly how the insurance sector kind of works. They'll just make shit up. So I mean, isn't this interesting? Is that academics are allowed to use official time to do free labor for journals, right? Journals into which knowledge is put in, which has been paid for by public money.
Right. The journal system is so crazy.
Right.
It's
which
yeah.
Which the public can't access.
Yeah, it's so insane, that whole subsystem of all of this.
So you see, I mean, this is perversion. You know, this is absolute perverse. This is, I guess, what the church must have been like while the pedophilia crisis was on. So on one hand, you talk about grace and the Lord, and then you have this. So I think there's this internal corruption which sets in, and so my kind of analogy of fungus and mold was this: is that it starts eating in a corner and then slowly spreads. And then you can't tell the difference. So we know, for example, with publications, like this is an absolute. So it is free labor, it is exploitation, it is misuse of public funding, right? So it took. So I was a part of that early pioneer movement of the open access publishing. The Zizek journal was published under kind of open access. It was met with a lot of resistance by, within the academy. Oh, well, where is its research? What's the term now? I'm 3 weeks out, and I'm forgetting the terms now. What is its research? What's the term that's used?
Not sure what you're going for.
Quality. There's this thing around.
Research excellence framework, the REF.
No, for the journals, you have the impact.
Impact factor.
Yeah. Where is the impact factor of this new journal?
Right.
But to Paul's credit, he soldiered on, and he said that I refuse to be a part of a system that exploits. So he never applied for research grants, because he thought it was a scam, and he said, "Look, I'm publishing books, so books aren't counted. So this is the other scam, you see. So if you look at the research excellence framework, right, on which every researcher is judged, right, they don't accept books. They don't accept systematic literature review.
Right.
So it's quite interesting that in the sciences it is accepted, but in the social sciences, not accepted.
Right.
Now you would think that that lecturer who does systematic literature review is the expert on the field, because he or she knows what's latest, right? Rather than someone who has a narrow kind of understanding of the field, walks into a class, talks about his research, and how great he is. I've had this experience, where the students have looked at me and said, "What the fuck was that about?" Because you're so kind of up your own ass with your research,
Right.
But this is the game here, So
right.
So you've got to be research active. You've got to publish to a high standard, a standard which is defined by a club, right? So who does the assessment of the papers? It's your mates,
right?
There is no kind of objective standard here, right? So it'll be a committee of so you'll appoint an external reviewer who will often be your mate. So the director of the research in the school will have his or her mate who will be the reviewer. Between them, they can then fix a troublesome kind of academic.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? Oh, your research is only to start made, you know.
Yeah, there's also all kinds of screwy games with like citing yourself. You know, like impact factors can actually be gamed quite easily. Like I know I have friends who are editors of journals also. And it's like a few people can basically make a plan to cite a certain journal a bunch of times.
Absolutely.
And pretty quickly like shoot up the impact factor of a journal. So it's like there are all these weird citation rings. Like it's like cartel behavior. It's kind of like, it's like highly sublimated, like mafioso kinds of behaviors that you see in academia. I mean, real quick, actually, I think maybe we're not clear about the journal system for the average person. I don't think they really understand it. So if we could briefly, I want to, for all the listeners, I want to make really clear like how the journal system works, because it's so insane and it might be hard to understand if you don't know. So basically, in a nutshell, people, the way it works is academics, basically the first ingredient to understanding this is that journal publications are basically the main form of prestige in academia. So your stock price as a scholar increases primarily through the prestige of the journals that you publish in. That's the main coin of the realm for the most part. These journals, okay, so what are these journals? They're staffed by academics. So the academics are the editors, academics are the assistant managers. All the work, the intellectual work of the journal, with some exceptions, are staffed and run by academics. There's usually one or two like paid production people or whatever that are just kind of like non-academic production assistants or whatever. But for the most part, the journal is run by academics doing this as part of their job. They don't get paid extra at all. It's like part of their, well, actually some of them do get like money, I think, actually. But it's negligible. It's like part of the game, part of the salary that you're getting, more or less. And so the journal itself, like Elsevier or Wiley or whatever, like they hardly do shit. They mostly don't do anything. They have like, I guess they support the minimal infrastructure of like hosting the website, I guess. And of course of like, I guess facilitating like the actual printing in some sense, but for the most part, it's academics who do the work. And then of course, who are the writers that filling these journals with content? It's academics, of course, you know, because they're looking for their prestige. That's what they, you know, get rewarded for. And so Elsevier and Wiley and these publishers, they literally just sit back and they skim so much money. It's incredible. So this is what is really scandalous: is who buys journals? No one really, right? Libraries. Like normal human beings don't buy journals, because the actual cost for like one article is usually like $50 or something like that, and they're mostly like economically worthless. Like no individual would spend that money because there's no return on that. So the main buyers are institutional libraries, academic libraries for the most part. But because this is like, you know, the libraries they kind of have to buy these journals. The journals then basically get away with charging as much as they want. And so Elsevier and Wiley and these publishers who do nothing for the entire process charge thousands and thousands of dollars just for, you know, journal access that they don't even really do anything for. So it's incredibly perverted. And meanwhile, one of the really horrifying things is that a lot of the work that goes into this production of knowledge is getting public money. I mean, in one way or another, there's taxpayer money going into this research in many ways. And then it's put under lock and key by these publishing companies who, again, contribute nothing to this entire process, and make thousands and thousands of dollars, basically selling back to scholars and the public, but the public can't afford it. So they're not actually selling it back to the public at all. They're keeping it from the public altogether because it's completely unaffordable for any normal person. They're just selling it back to libraries and academics, the work that they did all by themselves already. So it's the most perverted cartel kind of dynamic you can imagine. And it's just normal. That's just seen as normal. That's just the game. That's the system. And so sorry, I thought that, you know, it was scandalous enough that for people who don't understand what's going on, it's worth kind of clarifying.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and just to kind of build on that, what is the evidence of access of these papers in the libraries?
Yeah, right.
Right? And I think this is a research question. What Taleb would say, that any researcher can send out the request for information. Could someone please give me a breakdown of how many papers have been accessed by students? Because if the claim is that we're buying it for the students, and if students aren't accessing it, then I think we have a scandal here. This has to be a monumental scandal, not just in terms of the money being wasted, but also in terms of who and what are we sort of educating here. You know, what is the quality of the output? You know, do students read papers? You know, do they search on journals? Do they read papers which have been which literally have been provided as links? So because the whole point out here is that you become sensitive to the idea of knowledge, going and searching for knowledge, for ideas, right? So the idea is that you, by the end of your undergraduate study, you kind of understand how to go about being an independent learner, right? So that you can judge just the worth of an information versus data, versus opinion, versus knowledge, you know, etc., etc. So I think there's that question. The second is, of course, about free labor, which you've touched upon. The third is I think around co-publication. If someone did a study and just looked up who all those co-authors are, and how many of those co-authors are academics versus students, because I do know that in many disciplines, even undergraduate dissertations are passed off as papers.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You know.
Interesting. So I don't think there's too much of that in our field. But are you saying that professors take the work of undergrads?
Yeah.
And publish it under their own name?
Or as a joint publication with them as the first author. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that's fair enough. I guess if it's co-authored, the student's getting credit.
I don't think the student was in on the game, you know.
Oh, they didn't know what they were doing.
Well, yeah, I think it's a gray kind of area here, you know.
Right. Okay.
And, so there's that side of things, you know.
Right.
And then of course there's this sort of exploitation of PhD students. Right. That's kind of another side to the whole scandal here.
Yes. And also master's programs are very controversial. Actually, someone in the public chat just said post-industrial academia is a plot to undo the Gutenberg galaxy as evidenced by MFA programs for creative writing even existing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And yeah, I mean, it's sort of well known within academia. Like a lot of academics, I don't think a lot of people know this, but academics often talk about in private, you know, there's a lot of, let's say, ethical uncertainty about the status of master's programs and the proliferation of master's programs that are largely kind of cosmetic. Because they're cash cows, basically, especially for international students, you know, the rising middle class in places like China. You know, these master programs in places like the UK they're really expensive. They're short and quick. And, you know, they're for especially people in the developing world, they're kind of just like a stamp of prestige that is attractive. But like, it's not at all clear that the extraordinary amounts of money that they're spending on these master programs are in any way rewarding, not even in terms of education, but both in the sense of, are they actually giving an education, but also do they even give you increased prospects of anything? And so there's a really serious ethical conversation that has to be had about the proliferation of these kind of like vanity master's programs.
Oh, well, I think that project really kicked off in the 90s. You know, I distinctly remember as a PhD student, I mean, I was naive. It was towards the end of the PhD, as I kind of attended these PhD conferences first, and then exchanging notes. I had become quite. I'd kind of gone towards the far left. You see, I used to at sort of one point call myself say Stalinist.
Oh yeah.
to the horrors of all these sort of Blairites, they go like, what? I said, yeah, absolutely. I'm a Stalinist, gulags for all,
You're tanky.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you're not anymore.
No, I sort of I was a member of the Labour Party. I was a card-carrying member of the party, etc., etc. But yeah, I mean, during that time, I observed this expansion of the postgraduate program, specifically as a money-making machine. I had come across academics who refused to teach on them. These were some. So I had the the privilege of being exposed to some really classy people, and these were kind of academics who would say things like, I think it is immoral to take in Chinese students we know who don't understand English. This is a scandal. Come on, we all know this, right? Yes, they may. So they may have cleared a legal requirement, which is the IELTS 6.57, right? But we all know that they struggle. It isn't their first language, So how can you be teaching courses when students all around you have got a dictionary open, and the poor chaps are recording your lectures, then they go back, translate it, try to kind of make sense, of. So and I think from the 90s now we have gone to what, 300, 400, 600 students, per course now, and this directive is coming from the top. I haven't seen one academic who had lined up this year for the ECU strike line up in the same way, mourning about the exploitation of the international students,
right? Because that's just how the machine runs. I mean,
so and this is where we sort of go back to the whole point, is that you're so much a part of the very establishment that you claim to critique, So,
right.
So let's stop pretending, Let's be good managers then, At least let's care about the customer.
Right. And something I've also noticed is that the way it's very sketchy to me that, I mean, I think the ethical issues around exploitative, really expensive kind of vanity master's programs are well known and discussed. What's interesting is they're discussed privately for the most part, not so publicly. And I've noticed recently that there's a certain weird like alliance between the public political left and the kind of higher education sector, including these programs. Yeah. So I mentioned to you when we talked on the phone the other day, I noticed, I thought this was very striking, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I think it was like a rather kind of profound little moment when I saw that, on Jacobin, the left-wing socialist magazine online, that one of their articles had the advertisement for the article was precisely one of these. I forget where it was, but it was like one of these like really expensive but like fashionable kind of brand name master's programs, basically. And that's when I just started thinking, like these socialist people at this magazine, there is this kind of like strong sociological affinity and alliance between this just obviously super fucked up academic system with all these problems we're talking about, all these plainly just highly visible, almost explicitly, exploitative, unjust, chaotic, horrifying dynamics that we're describing in many different subdomains of the system. And yet like the public political left really kind of has a position that this whole thing is, yeah, it has its problems, or what they say is that like that's capitalism kind of like fucking with the what should be a good, healthy public education system. But so yeah, there are imperfections, but that's capitalism, and we need like more socialism in order to solve those capitalistic entrances into a good public higher education. But in the meantime, what that means is like they're really kind of boosting and promoting and kind of are economically in bed with a system that is currently just like horrifyingly unjust and misleading. And so it's like, does that mean that capitalism just unfortunately is causing some biases that are unfortunate? Or is it that the actual higher education system is at its core perverse and disingenuous, and that the modern kind of political left has a kind of deep, similarly fundamental sort of alliance with that deep perversion of the higher education system? I mean, well, what do you think?
My understanding is, I think the vector of capital is now beyond the understanding of us. You know, I don't think we even comprehend what's going on here. You know, so I think the system of the academy is one of this deep extraction. It is purely an extractive machine,
right?
Into which you have these people who are more than happy to be managers, right? And they may have good intentions. Right? I can't. I have no kind of thermometer here that I can stick in and say, yes, you are clean, you aren't. You know, so. But it suffices to say that we haven't seen any evidence of people fighting back against that deep entrenchment of extraction.
Right.
So I think we are in the same kind of an extractive economy we have with in the academy as we have with say BT. You know, BT does not offer us any kind of a value add. You know, it's just this sort of extractive rentier class.
Yeah, definitely.
So this whole thing only works for two reasons. One is globalization, number one, so the expansion. So okay, so then I guess we'll have to sort of go back a bit. So if we look at sort of higher education, 12th century, you have Oxbridge, which is genuinely a liberal education. You kind of learn theology, you learn the sciences, you learn classics, etc., etc. So you kind of become this transdisciplinary person. And I think we should flag up this whole thing around discipline, interdisciplinarity, and transdisciplinarity. But then, sometime around the early 19th century, we have the emergence of the University of London, which is a set of colleges, and they are essentially a certifying body. Right, that's what it is. Which then, first decade of the 20th century, we have Leeds, Liverpool, Manchester, but these were essentially sort of institutions for sort of engineering training. Right? So these were formed precisely to meet the needs of the industry, the industrial kind of expansion, right? But then the first big expansion happens in sort of early 1960s, which is after Robbins' report, and it's quite interesting. These were called plate glass unis. So the early 20th century, they were called red brick universities. 1960s, they were called the plate glass because of their modernist kind of architecture. So it's quite interesting how architectural terms define these movements. But it is only in 1992 that you have this massive expansion where polys are turned into the uni. So earlier, for your listeners, you had polytechnics, which imparted training for employment,
right?
While a university was for learning, for general learning, right?
Right.
And so the Higher sort of Education Act of 1992 allowed for that anyone can now. So all these polytechnics could be converted, right? And this was linked with the first rise of your tuition fees. So it starts off. Then by 2002, you have the first rise, and then it's slowly kind of, so it's kind of linked with debt. Right? Mm-hmm. So now you're looking at a student leaves a 3-year course with a debt of roughly about between 60 to 70,000 pounds.
What's the average? Say it again.
About between 60 to 70,000 pounds.
Is that average in the UK? Really?
Yeah. Right. That is fucking huge, man.
Right. Yeah.
My daughter starts this year, and I was thinking, there's no fucking way I will let her, as a 22-year-old, start life with such a debt. It is fucking insane. It is criminal, right?
Right. Yeah. Someone actually mentioned that in the chat. I think Jim Johnson said that all of this we're talking about is really running on the fuel of student debt.
Absolutely.
So it's like, universities are really, as I like what you said before when you said it's just a purely extractive system, because I think that's actually really crucial, because what I was kind of criticizing before about how the kind of contemporary radical left kind of public position is sort of like higher education, really good, public education, really good things. There's a kind of core public socialist kind of value at the core of it. But that, neoliberal capitalism is kind of fucking it up at its edges. But I think when you think that way, then you're actually defending and say and even coming to represent what is actually a system that's rotten at its core. It's extraction all the way down to the absolute bottom.
Absolutely.
And so, like, when you're kind of dressing that up in a positive light and in a kind of trying to give that like a socialistic public service kind of gloss, I don't really believe you. Like, I don't believe that. I think what you're actually doing is kind of fibbing, and you're kind of telling lies to kind of like promote an agenda that is going to like get your team more money and resources, but you're just another team in like the competitive extraction game. I think anyway.
So, which is why then you need to have all this spurious research, which you can then sell. So you're the judge, jury, sort of executioner. I mean, I think then it's a fantastic scam, isn't it? Right? And we know now, and the other part of this extraction now is because every school gets a grant from the government for every PhD student.
Okay.
Are you kind of aware of this?
I try not to look too deeply into any of this stuff. I try not to ask questions. So I mean, I supervise PhD students.
Yeah,
I don't think I actually knew that as a fact.
Because of my political economy and kind of accounting training, these are the things that I would be looking out for.
Okay.
Just some morbid curiosity, And then I said, okay, so again, go to kind of any school, the pressure to increase PhD numbers, right?
Right.
Now, you know that there is no employment available. You know that, right? And you'll hide the fact that every PhD student, besides the fact that they're funding themselves, right? Again, a PhD, so an international PhD student ends up spending again something to the extent of 70,000, 60 to 70,000 pounds. This is including living costs, you see.
Right, sure.
Which, if I was to use kind of India as a benchmark, in in a major metropolis like Bangalore or Chennai, that would get you a house.
Right.
Right. So we're not talking small change here. For a northern student, I mean, in the UK, 60, 70,000 pounds would get you a house in the north. You know.
Yeah.
You will get a decent house, right? And so, where are the jobs in London? How much do they pay? They pay, you know, they kind of barely pay your, you know, food, right? So there's a fantastic article. I think it was in the Guardian, or this guy, he set up a blog where he talks about how he came to hate London. So he's an Australian, moved to London, and he realized that he couldn't eat because all his money was going towards rent. You know.
Right.
Now, before I kind of returned to the academia after my PhD, so after my PhD, I said, you know what, I don't think I want to be an academic. I went and worked in the industry. And I would see these kids, you know, from the heartland moving into London, earning what, 18, 20,000, right? If you lived in London, you're looking at a shared accommodation, right? So shared accommodation in, say, a place like Clapham, those kinds of areas, you will set you back by at least £600, right? And then so your then your travel costs, you know, etc. So your savings potential was what a couple of £100 per month, you know.
Right.
So to me, I was kind of looking at it from these multiple perspectives, and to me, it just made no sense. Why are we producing so many graduates when we don't have those jobs? Where are the jobs? You know, for heaven's sake, are you telling me that all these sociology students we are producing have any meaningful work? You know,
right. Hey, Kishore, someone in the chat wants to know more about the Australian guy and his blog. Do you remember what was his name, or do you know the name of the blog?
Yeah, let me see if I can find Australian. How to find. Yeah. Okay. I'm sharing it with you here.
Oh, great! In the Hangout.
Yeah. So if you could then share it with share it. I don't know.
Yeah. Great. Perfect. I'll do that.
Where's the
top left? You see a blue icon.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Right.
Chat. Nice.
There you go.
There we go. So okay, you can carry on talking, and I'll just kind of.
But I think
here's the link. I'm going to put the link in the public chat too. So
I think you should sort of read out the bits from the report. You know, I think it's a fantastic piece. You know.
Okay, this is a Vice article. Okay, I see. So is this the article that reports about the guy, the Australian guy, or this is the Australian guy?
This is him giving a first person kind of account. You know.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that. I put it in the public chat, so they have it. So we can carry on with what we were saying.
So I saw this across the board. You know, young kids. Now, because I had experience, I was generating surplus value for my clients. So I was making a nice packet. Right? I could afford to sort of travel in cabs. I had a company credit card.
Right.
I traveled business or first class, but all the other sort of employees, you know, the young ones especially, they were all, literally living hand to kind of mouth existence, you know. and again, because I came from the left, this really troubled me, you know. And again, I saw that continue. And what was quite interesting was that all these kids were mouthing exactly the kind of nonsense we hear in the campuses.
Right.
I was thinking, what's going on here? You know, you're being shafted. You've paid through your nose. Okay, you're kind of leading a horrible life, and yet you are mouthing all these inane platitudes about things. You know, while the world around you is crumbling. You know.
Right. You know, sometimes the way that I think about kind of global cosmopolitan high education culture is, do you know those devices that people use to kind of kill bugs in their backyard? Do you know those lights? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's like that blue light that you hang from some sort of post, and the light attracts the bugs. The bugs want to fly into the light, and then they get zapped to death. I often think that basically, like, you know, high educated, cosmopolitan, urban, global culture is basically like a bunch of those types of blue lights that pull in irresistibly. They're irresistible to young people looking for, you know, to find themselves, looking for their path in life. It's like an irresistible blue light that people just need to go towards, no matter how much it costs, no matter how, you know, undesirable it is in many obvious ways. It's like a blue light that they just can't resist moving towards. And then they go there and then they get zapped and they're stuck, and like it sucks. And it's like, I see that all the time, I feel like. And in some sense, I'm guilty of it. That's my own life right now in some sense, because, you know, like, I'm doing fine. I'm not complaining. But, you know, I think about my own situation. Like, why am I in England? Why am I an academic? Why am I at this university? Now finding myself embroiled in all of these like deeply pathological systems that we're talking about. And I'm like, it's really because I've had this like drive for recognition, for status, for, you know, security and money, obviously, like all these things that people want. And for that, I've been trying to like climb this ladder to like cultural power and money. But actually, what's hilarious, and well, it's sad for me, but it's hilarious for other people, is that I compare myself to people that I grew up with in the neighborhood I grew up with. In the neighborhood I grew up in, I compare myself to people that I grew up with there. And a lot of those people, like most of them went to university. It was like a kind of middle class area. A lot of my peers from that time went to university, but they certainly didn't do masters. They didn't do PhDs. They didn't have any like grand ambitions to be like a fancy professor like me or whatever. They went to university and then they went back to live near their family. And most of them are doing much better than me financially. Like, they own houses. You know, they're like saving more. Their rent is lower. They have already started families. Like, we have basically spent an extraordinary amount of money just to be able to move to the UK. Like, the little bit of savings that I had before I got the job, I had to spend all of the money just to move here, basically. And now, yes, I have like a good job or whatever, but I have to have that job in like a Western, you know, advanced liberal democracy and like a big city. I have to pay ridiculous rents, and council taxes here are insane, and there are all these sorts of, you know, taxes just that I'm willing to pay simply because I want fancy status and like the global hierarchy. And it's like, when you start to look around about how the systems actually work, you're like, is any of this even fucking worth it? Like, it's not at all clear.
I mean, to me, the you know, the silliness of the whole thing was, hang on, okay, your entire model is based around selling of these bonds, right? And those bonds are in turn based on this assumption that this flow of Chinese students will continue, right? What if that pipeline dries out? What happens then? You know, like all speculations, this will you know, burst. This bubble will burst. What happens? You know. What happens to all these people who have been employed? You know. So to me, the reason why I said that, I think there is, rather than a deceleration, I think there is. I think the academia is very much sort of entangled in this vector of the accelerationism. You know.
Okay.
Which it can't extricate itself right, out of. And as you said, it has now formed these links with the political and with the cultural sort of establishment, which the right calls the cathedral, right?
Right.
So you have this cathedral, and we have seen this with Brexit, right? That there was not almost in pretty much every campus was quite clear. You know, we are for staying in. You know?
Right.
And I was called a Nazi by friends, by sort of academic friends.
Interesting.
They had no hesitations calling me a Nazi because
you supported Brexit.
Yeah, absolutely. You know.
And publicly so?
Yeah, absolutely. I was. People can go look up my archives of. I've purged my Twitter archives. Not because I'm kind of afraid or ashamed. I can defend my views.
Sure.
It's just that I thought, just make a clean break and focus on my sort of entrepreneurial.
Sure. I mean, it's worth me saying for listeners that to be pro Brexit in academia is pretty crazy. I mean, it's like it's almost a total consensus and that Brexit is a bad thing, and the small number of people who do support Brexit, because statistically inevitably there'll be some, they just keep their mouth shut for the most part. Absolutely. So yeah, people need to understand that being public about that is like quite a provocation.
Yes, and so to me it was quite a revelation to kind of hear from academics, because I had a fairly large academic network, which just fell apart during Brexit. And I was thinking, wow, isn't this interesting? Here is a community that prides itself on knowledge, on freedom of opinion, freedom of thinking. And the moment you start using certain, the moment you sort of go against that consensus, that's it. You're out.
So you're saying you had a major kind of falling out, like people kind of refused to talk with you and disassociated with you and stuff,
or being aggressive, or like I said, I was openly called a Nazi. I was still.
Wow.
It was implied, not implied. I was told very clearly. Yeah, well, something to the extent of that I was being that I was a fool enough to be playing into doing the job of Nazis. I said, seriously, it is precisely this kind of a language that when the real Nazis come, you won't be able to tell the difference.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a real problem. Do you want to maybe actually? So real quick, there's one kind of little argument I want to make.
Yeah,
and it's kind of about this. I really was interested in what you said about is higher education, part of the accelerator or part of the decelerator? That's a really interesting question. So I want to kind of give a short little take on that, and you can respond. And then maybe after that, we will, I feel like we've covered a lot of ground. Maybe after that, then we can talk a little bit about, I would love to hear your views on like where you think all this is going in the future, especially because you're a businessman. And I think I'm always a little extra interested in people who have experience within an institution such as academia, but also have, experience in the business world, because I think that just gives you a uniquely, it gives you extra advantage, I think, in having a sense of the lay of the land, perhaps. So I'd be curious to hear like where you see this all going in the near and medium term. The one thing I wanted to kind of lay out a little bit is why I labeled this the higher education decelerator, because I was just trying to think of a pithy way to kind of summarize the themes that we planned on talking about. And it's interesting that you kind of disagree with that, because that's useful. We can have a little debate then maybe. And maybe if you convince me, I'll change the title of the video. But the reason I put that is because the way that I see it is the best way to understand the university to me, the way that I've tended to think about these things under one kind of rubric, is that I see it as a cartel of humans basically trying to slow down and suppress the onrush of increasing intelligence and kind of what Nick Land calls capital autonomization.
Yeah.
Really. And so it's like I think one of the real subtexts or subplots in everything that we're talking about is the rise of things like artificial intelligence, which is really just one buzzword for one vector of increasing, intelligenic sophistication across global capitalism as a whole. Like systems are getting smarter than we are. In other words, what this really boils down to, and we know that, like we feel it. We can sense that if you're just like a normal person, even with a high IQ, but you're not like a super genius person. So like the average academic, let's say, definitely smart, high IQ, conscientious, but not, like a high level computer programmer or engineer in Silicon Valley or something like that, right? Your position, like right now, you're still doing fairly well for yourself. You have status, respect, a secure job, and you're recognized as an intelligent, as an intellectual. But you're under siege everywhere you look. I mean, by increasing intelligence in systems that are non-human. And so I see the university as kind of like this big kind of anti-intelligence union in some sense, by people who are like just smart enough to see that they're in deep shit and they're smart enough to create advanced symbolic structures that kind of like confuse the outside world. No, really, but that's like the main purpose of like highfalutin academic languages. It's really just like it's a smokescreen. It's like it looks advanced. It is advanced in some internal sense. It's complicated symbolic relationships, but that don't really like mean anything and don't really go anywhere. But it's enough to kind of create this public image of intelligence that's going to be kind of left alone. And it's all this like it's all this defensive posturing to basically lock down resources for intellectuals in a world where human intellectuals are increasingly obsolete. So that's what I meant by Decelerator. Like I think a lot of these symptoms we're talking about can be understood as examples of this type of process where humans are basically trying to use institutional manipulations to protect their own resources in a world where non-human intelligence is increasingly threatening them.
Okay, so I would just make a distinction between people in the system versus the system, and I think the system is as we have laid the contours. So from the big capex to the opex, right? It's all about capital, and these guys, it is beyond their understanding. They don't even care about it. So this is where I think the big sort of cleavage is that they have willingly sort of absolved themselves of that responsibility.
Who is they there?
That is the academics.
Academics, like researchers.
No, I'm talking about everyone who is involved in the machine, whether it's researchers, whether it is lecturers, whether it is academics who have now become sort of administrators. Like, for example, a dean is an administrator.
Right.
Right. You don't have managers per se from the top. Like, these are not professional managers.
Mm-hmm.
These are essentially academics who have become the managers with some really shitty managerial sort of understanding. Like, I mean, I used to kind of joke about this. Is that we are such a mismanaged kind of organization. That is the academy. This is across the board. But it just makes no sense. So, for example, an academic is fit enough to shape the minds of thousands of people, right? I mean, you can actually shape the minds. Like you can fill them with garbage or with ideas, which is what's happening now. We have had, I think, was it yesterday or the day before? I think it was in Liverpool or in Manchester, where the students had defaced, Kipling's poem.
Oh yeah, I think I heard about that.
So you see all these tendencies. So you have effectively divorced yourself from that economic reality, right? Only for personal this is what I would say was happening during the colonial times, right? So you had people in the colonies who were looking out for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And these are, as you said, so there's that bit, okay, the world's going to, so they could see the post, the sort of anti-colonial movement. It was right at their doorstep, yet they pretended that things were kind of okay. No. So I think you are right in the sense that they're hoping that somehow with their deepening of the links with the other parts of the system, like, for example, the polity, the media, the cultural industries. I mean, isn't it sort of interesting that the conversation, right? If you've heard of the conversation, this is a publication which seems, which is run by, which is a partnership between a university and I think some journalists.
Oh yeah,
right? Which takes academic voices, which essentially is, because one of my pitches to the conversations was turned down.
oh yeah.
And so I sort of looked up, the person who had sent me the rejection note, and this was a kid. She was a journalist, who had no experience in the field. Right?
See, that's funny because that site, The Conversation, they'll publish almost anything. It's not like it's not, the whole point is it's supposed to be like very, open and egalitarian. It's like not, it's not selective at all. Like the, yeah. So.
I say, oh, you know what? I can publish on my own blog. Yeah. So this is the point: is that knowledge, as you said, knowledge production is, I think, now out of the hands of humans. I know people who are doing really large-scale qualitative analysis, right? As in, you're talking about at scale, which academics are fucking clueless about. They're still doing your old, let's talk to 10 people,
Yeah.
And that forms a paper, so I think there's that bit which is going on. So I'm not sure if it's just turd floating on the water. So while there's a flood,
Right.
And there's this turd which is spinning in its own. There's some kind of a vortex, which is keeping that turd in a place,
Right. Yeah.
That's how.
But your point is well taken though about how higher education is still 100% in the kind of accelerating vortex, but so it's like, I mean, maybe the way you square the two interpretations is that, it is 100% down to its core an extractive system all the way down. And so because of that, it's as much, sub-machine in the capitalist mega machine as any, but the people in it are basically trying to do all of these kinds of like simulated and dissimulated performances to basically protect themselves.
Absolutely.
And to kind of ride the wave, like to ride the wave of whatever resources they can get. So it's like, in some sense, like it's easy to kind of imagine a kind of positive, high speed, accelerating kind of vector when you think about like the amounts of money that have been unleashed from students upward into like the coffers of like VCs, for instance. Like you can see that over the past several decades, like since 1992, for instance. Yeah. Like that's a kind of accelerating thing where like capitalism is increasingly bringing higher education into its orbit, and certain players are riding that as a wave upward, no doubt. So like the VCs are on an accelerating wave upward, in some sense, because that's really exciting or whatever. But like the larger mass of, for them, obviously it's not exciting for anyone else, but the larger mass of players in higher education are mostly just like humanistic, compassionate, fairly like pretty high IQ, left-leaning people who just want to hold hands and tell whatever lies they need to tell to make themselves feel like everything's going to be okay, and they're going to hold on to their income no matter how much machines are smarter than them.
which is where it's sort of brings us to the point that if you look at the average sort of academic, they all live in these leafy lane suburbs, right? So there's that personal benefiting here. They think that because they know that if this gig was to end, they have no place to go, because, as you said, they are not the cleverest people, right? They're just about a little better than the others.
They're not careerists, and also their skills are extremely narrow and impractical. So it's like
absolutely, so so here you have this complete. I think my view is that this is the last throes of the academy.
Interesting.
And something else might come out of this. That's my hope. So I'll give an example. So if you could share this with your. So I came across this interesting school called Lander School.
Oh, I've read about them. Yeah, I see what they're doing. That's a really interesting model. Yeah.
I mean, this is people with skin in the game.
I can look it up. Why don't you tell them about it? I'll bring it up.
So Lander School is a residential program. You get free accommodation for, I think, 12 weeks or something like that. You get a free computer, and you don't pay fees. It is called lambdaschool.com.
Okay.
LAMBDA. LAMB.
Oh, Lambda?
Yeah, Lambda.
Ah, yes, right. Got it.
School.com.
Right, go on.
Yeah. So so you get trained, and then afterwards, so it's a 30 weeks course. You don't pay any fees, and they take 16% of your or 13% of your income up to a certain ceiling for 3 years.
Right. So you don't pay anything unless you get a good job, in other words.
Plus, it is a residential course, because they know that for many people, they can't even afford to sort of stay. So you get free accommodation, right? So there you go.
Wait, they even pay for your lodging?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, now compare this with say a university.
Right.
Now, why on earth would I waste my time? Similarly, I think you've had Peter Thiel, his foundation. He encourages bright kids to kind of leave uni, come.
Right.
So he gives them money, no salary. I think they get a basic stipend, a living kind of allowance, but they can pursue any idea they want.
Right.
Anything. I mean, this could be a scientific sort of experiment. So, and he's looking at game-changing technologies.
Wow. So they charge, it's only 17% of salary for 2 years.
There you go. Yeah.
With a 30K maximum.
Yeah.
That seems like really fair for these high-paying jobs.
Absolutely. So how do you now square up, right? Ethics here. See, this is my issue out here, is that, look, you're not even offering a course which has any real sort of application, right? I had this issue, students, they would. So I taught on a few courses. One of them was a communications course, and I said, look, communication isn't about communication. Communication is about a whole host of things, from media and technology to politics to sociology to kind of economics, etc., etc. So we'll approach it differently. And we said, okay, so what do you think are the kind of issues of our time now? So students said feminism. I said, okay, great. Let's have a conversation about feminism. Oh, well, there's blah blah blah. There's all this sort of oppression, and so they essentially parroted out all these standard phrases which you read in in the Guardian, Standard,
It's a catechism,
yeah,
really.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then I said, okay, fine, all great. Can you name me 2 trade union movements in the UK that defined trade, the unionism in the UK? And they were like, what's this got to do with all this? I said, well, because both of them were led by the women. One was the Ilford factory strike, which was led by an Indian immigrant. They kind of lost out. They were on strike for, I think, a year and a half. That galvanized the entire trade union, the movement. No one paid attention. And these are women just for a fair wage.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't even have basic knowledge about struggles for wages. So I mean, what are you? I mean, how on earth have you based this this understanding about these complex ideas when you don't even have a basic understanding of issues? Okay, which town are you from? All right, I'm from this town. Can you name me one big scandal from your town that involves your gender? No. I said, well, in your town you had the rape of the underage girls, right? These many, over these many years. Did you? I mean, have you heard of this? No. I said, why? I mean, so let's have a conversation. Have a conversation about why you did not hear about these things.
Right.
And,
yeah.
So there's something really sort of rotten in the way we kind of engage with knowledge.
Right. For sure. I mean, this like progressive catechism, it's like it's just a few stock slogans and formulas that are really quick, easy, simple, and you can kind of apply them to anything, and you can sound more, kind of intelligent. Depending on how intelligent you are, you can kind of dress them up and make them a little bit more sophisticated. So it's like it serves precisely the purpose of like efficient performance of intelligence, and it has like almost zero to do with trying to figure out like any truths of reality. It's like it's just not designed for that. And so yeah, if you give someone like a confounding empirical puzzle, like some event happens, like let's think about this, honestly and clearly, it just everything shuts down.
Absolutely. So the question which I think I kind of I'm beginning to kind of like your formulation of this deceleration. I think there's a way of formulating this, which is that I think status. I think we're all losing access to status, right? And status is extremely hard to come by, right? So we have to find some way. So, for example, my kind of having a PhD has no fucking status. Who the fuck cares? No one cares. I can't. Like, I could walk into the market and say, right, I've made this. So what? Like, right. So I could find some other way of now gaining my status, right? And status is an inherently biological phenomenon. It's a sociological. We all seek status. So if I can't gain status, then I'll find ways. Okay, where does status lie? And then let me find my way of working my way up. So within a group, I can now declare my status by saying that I am a feminist. Right. So these performative aspects have become ways, and so I think you're right in the sense that this is some sad attempt at trying to kind of claw back control in a world where since the 90s we have had one catastrophe after the other. I mean,
right.
Let's start with the big economic collapse, right? So the boom days are gone. I came to the UK during the boom time. Okay. Rather than, I mean, I could have moved here and made shitloads of money, right? I was from the IT sector. And at the time there was the you had the highly skilled migration program.
Okay.
I could have used that, moved here, made money, and sort of been ahead of this curve. But instead, I chose to sort of get into a risk. I spent nearly £100,000 on my master's and my PhD. I had a kid. I had to sort of raise a kid, and sort of, as you know, you can't work as an international student. You can only work 20 hours a week. So so now for me, it would have been very easy to have gotten into the whole post-colonial game, right, and positioned myself as an academic, right? Okay, the color of my skin, and I could talk about race and sort of intersectionality, and these were things that were happening. But to me, as you said, those simple tests, those simple sort of empirical tests, were just failing. These ideas were failing. So when I kind of heard this whole thing that Grenfell is because of racism, I said, come on, come on, we can do better.
Yeah.
And but then I think this is, in my view, this is an echo chamber. This is the dying gasp of a bunch of people who have just lost all understanding of the world. They are lost. They're clueless. I mean, look at Clinton. She's still banging on. She still refuses to kind of accept or take her responsibility.
Right. So okay. So this is good then. So if you, and I, by the way, I tend to agree. I tend to have similar intuitions that we're really in kind of the death throes of higher education, but I don't really have a very strong or clear model of how it's going to pan out, or what's really going on and what to expect. So maybe you can unpack how you see things playing out. Like, what's the end game to all of this?
Well, I think the the social constructivism will meet empiricism by way of AI.
Okay.
And I think that's when the fun will begin.
But what will happen to academics, like current status quo legacy academics? Like, will they stay around but become irrelevant, or will that institution, like, here's a more specific question that I think about a lot. Do you think there's going to be a turning point sometime soon when enrollments will just start to disappear, where like young people are going to wake up to this sort of stuff, and there'll be some sort of cascade, some sort of information and behavior cascade, where everyone just stops going to university and does things like Lambda School, and that stuff all takes off, and there's like a major clear kind of institutional collapse and regeneration into something else? Like, do you see that kind of, or do you think we're on the brink of something like that, or no?
That has been my fantasy for
yeah.
So I was seriously hoping that there would be a housing market collapse, because that would set things off. But I think we've come very close to that. But somehow, capital from outside is being pumped in to kind of keep it afloat, because there is no kind of internal money now, right? So the whole housing bubble in the UK isn't being driven through the internal circulation of the cash.
Okay.
So we know that there's something going on there.
So what is wait, first of all, I'm not that up on like current finance. So you're saying there is a housing bubble in the UK right now?
Yeah, absolutely.
And what's driving it? International money, or what?
I would think so. That's my sort of limited sort of understanding, because where I live, I kind of bought a new house. It is fucking Dewsbury, mate. Okay, Dewsbury is like it is sort of architecturally a beautiful town, right? But since the 70s, it's been going down. There's very little kind of economic activity down here. And I look at it, hang on, how are these house prices even justified? Makes absolutely no sense, right? So where is the money coming from for those houses? I have no idea. I can't see any kind of evidence here. Right. So my own house was oversold to me by 10% within the but immediately after the purchase, it sort of fell by about £40,000, nearly 20%.
Wow.
And I think so. I paid 220. And I think it isn't really worth more than 160, and that is a phenomenal valuation there. Now in London, you're looking at the housing prices going into the millions. So my sister, she bought a house, which literally in 2012 was 220,000. Okay, in 2017, she bought it for 650. Okay, that is some crazy appreciation, and I'm told it has already gone up, while my house price over here has fallen.
Interesting.
Right. So there's something going on, and people who have been working in the housing market tell me that there's a bubble here.
Interesting.
It turned out as so I couldn't afford to pay for the deposit. I couldn't even raise the 20% required by the bank. So the government at the time had this first-time home buyers scheme where you raise 5%. The builder would pay 15%. I mean, this is all fictional, isn't it? Because these are all fictional sort of values. So the builder isn't really shelling out 15%.
Right.
Right. So I learned about this when we recently bought out the builder's 15%. So it turned out they had sold their equity to a company in the UK which owns all these builders' equities, which in turn is owned by an offshoring company.
Okay.
Right. So that's where I kind of learned, okay, this is quite interesting. I have no way of learning who these buyers are. Clearly they have shorted. This is definitely some shorting going on here,
Okay.
So there are no jobs, right? And we seem to be sort of in a construction boom, So
right.
Yeah. So I think some kind of a collapse will cause people to really think hard about. I should share with you a short interview with Peter Thiel where he talks about the educational bubble.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. So, all right. Well, we've covered a lot of ground. I mean, do you have any last thoughts?
Well, I think there's the bit about discipline. I think that from a higher sort of education point of view, this is really key. And my kind of argument is that you don't need to sort of go to a university.
Oh yeah, that's right. You wanted to talk a little bit about like under what conditions should someone go to university,
absolutely,
and when they shouldn't. So yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
So I also kind of run my own mentoring program where I take on students who have either been to a university but then are struggling,
Okay.
or students who are thinking of going to a university, and I say, you know what, think hard, think hard about why you want to go to a uni. And this is an advice I sort of gave my own daughter. Right? And I said, look, get this idea kind of out of your head that going to kind of Oxford will make you a clever person.
Right.
Then you could go to the University of Huddersfield, which is literally down the road. Because just go and look up the evidence. How many Nobel Prize winners in the sciences have come from Oxford? Very few. So she's into physics, and she did some research. Manchester has produced 9 or 11 Nobel Prize winners.
Okay.
But Oxford has produced 2 in physics. So there's no correlation between knowledge production and the status. So
right.
So I think that's something that I would say that all potential students should think really hard about. They should explore options. Things like Lambda School is an example. And the question that I would ask is, would you take this course if you weren't given a certificate?
That's a good question.
Right. So, for example, here's a simple test. Would you or I be an understudy to a medical doctor who teaches everything about medicine, right? We would work with him or her for, let's say, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, right? But we would not get a certificate. Would we take that course? Absolutely. I would love to kind of have that, because that's a skill that I can actually use.
Right.
But would I do a course in gender studies? And if I had a certificate? No,
Right. I see the idea of using that as a litmus test for what's worth doing.
Worth it. Would you be able to put that to the use?
I think the only exception to that, there are small numbers of exceptions where, doing something like a humanities degree can be, if you're very motivated to use it for your own purposes, like you're going to read really widely and you're going to write really widely, and you're going to be like genuinely expanding yourself towards the direction towards like a fuller way of being, a better form of being, and you're going to become a better person and smarter and happier and more fulfilled and all of those things. Like, if you can actually do that, you can use education as a time and space for doing that, and then you can get a tremendous amount out of it. But that's the qualifications are: 1, it's not actually the university educating you, it's you educating yourself, and you're using it as like social permission.
Absolutely.
To basically get obsessed with books and read and write and stuff like that. That's basically what I did. That's my model of like, I have nothing but the fondest memories of university. I loved my 4-year degree program more than anything, and I went into debt for it, and I'm still paying that debt. But for me, I mean, I wouldn't have traded it for anything, because I just used it. It was permission to just read and do nothing but read and write what I want and explore and stuff. So I loved it. But I'm not everyone. And if you're not going to do that, then yeah, your litmus test, like, I think is a good one.
And also I think you should have a passion in life. And I know this is the tritest statement that we all make, or you need to have passion. But I would say, okay, so here's an example, right, of passion. There's a former student of mine. She studied theater. And because she had this idea that if you did a degree in theater, you'd get a job in theater. Right? So you have this very kind of instrumentalist view of education, which comes from school, right? You're told, okay, do this, and then out you'll pop as this fully formed person,
Right.
She came to my master's course, and she did quite well. But she talked to me and she said, you know what, my passion is in acting, but I also have an interest in the visual arts, and I would like to kind of do something with that. I said, absolutely, that is brilliant. So you've learned about advertising, which has brought you close to the idea of thinking conceptually and then communicating it. Right? I said, okay, have you thought about combining your skills in theater? Because because you know, right, everything there is to in terms of sets, lighting. So you have an innate understanding of all those ideas. You have skills with your hands. You can actually draw. Have you thought of becoming a set designer? No. And now no one had put these two together.
Mm-hmm.
So the way she then sort of put this into practice is she went and found work with an architecture. With a firm that designs sort of high-end spas. Okay, so she's there in their sort of design teams, working with them, learning about interiors, learning the trade, etc. Then on the side, she's learning storyboarding. So she's learning bits, So she's now on that path of being a self-learner.
Nice, yeah.
But this won't come from a university.
Right. No, right. Not at all.
How do you kind of take this trajectory? And she's on course to becoming so she's set herself a goal of being an independent set designer, being an interior decorator to pay for the bills.
Nice.
Right.
There
you go.
And that's just being clever and being flexible and being strategic and intelligent and figuring out how to use your strengths and avoid your weaknesses. Absolutely. And you're right. Like that's just like life, street smarts and navigating life. But university doesn't give you any of that, really.
No, because these courses are about the academics. This isn't about you.
Right. Definitely. And they make like they make a big performance about trying to give attention to like job placement and stuff like that. It's no.
So I think kids have to be sort of autodidacts, and I think that is what helped me, and I'm sure that's what helped you, is that we have been autodidacts, and that's the kind of a company I kept while I was doing my master's and PhD. I just avoided, anyone who wasn't an autodidact.
Right. Yeah. Also, yeah. There are a lot of also like their mental and personality traits or mental tendencies that university actually cultivates that for a lot of people are actually counterproductive.
Absolutely.
So I think the one big one being external locus of control. Are you familiar with the psychological concept? Like people vary in the ways that they attribute causality to various phenomena. And so we call external locus of control, meaning you tend to attribute the causes of the stuff that happens in your life to external outside structural causes.
Okay.
Whereas internal locus of control, you feel like every good thing that happens to you and every bad thing that happens to you is because you did something to affect it. So,
right.
So it's are you the source of control, or are outside circumstances the source of control? And, the whole university experience, like both implicitly and then also explicitly, like the whole fashionable kind of like lefty social justice radical theory catechism, it's all about external locus of control. Oh, and the reason I mention this is because that's well documented, like one of the best predictors of, various types of success. I forget the details. But basically in a nutshell, internal locus of control is generally much better for you to have. Okay. Good things happen when you believe that you can cause your environment to change. Basically, it's kind of obvious. Yeah. So if you believe that you're a source of control over the environment, good things generally happen. That's associated with things like entrepreneurialism and stuff like that, right? but if you have really high external locus of control, that has lots of negative implications. I think it's associated, I forget the exact literature, but I think it's associated with things like anxiety and depression.
Right.
I believe for obvious reasons, I think. And think about that, because the whole like leftist catechism that is fashionable in like humanities departments, it's basically you couldn't design a more direct system of beliefs that cause external locus of control.
Oh, yeah.
And so like people come out of university, but also it's the way that the university, the way it's conducted. So like nowadays students are very handheld, you know, they're kind of like from the day you get there, you have people kind of telling you when you need to do things, when you need to, where you need to be. You have all these advisors and all of these kinds of like administrative systems trying to help you get through. And it just teaches you that like this world is a game to navigate so that other people and structures can be made to give you what you want or need. And that's like the opposite. That's precisely what the current economic changes are making less and less true. So it's like the reality is like the only people who are surviving, let alone flourishing in the current economy, are people who are willing to kind of like wake up every morning and are willing to basically like, you know, teach themselves totally new skills like every day or week just to keep up with the changing, the crazy changing environment. Like if you don't believe that you can do that and you don't get good at doing that, you don't have a chance at like really thriving. And it's unfortunate because, you know, I do, it's a shame, you know, I do wish humans had more insulation from competitive market pressures and stuff. I would love to figure out a way how we can engineer that, especially for young people to feel like, you know, to take 4 years off to just read and not feel like all this stress and having to reinvent themselves every week or whatever. But the reality is like, if you want to make decent money and stay up to date in this like economy, and like, you have to be able to teach yourself stuff from all these different websites, and you need to be able to learn what websites you teach yourself them from. And like the current programmers, like computer programming and stuff, like I do enough of it. I'm like very, you know, not sophisticated, but I do a little bit of computer programming, and I've taught myself. And you just teach yourself by looking at websites. Yeah. Like I've never even took courses. I just like Googled how to do things, and you can teach yourself anything that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But it gives you anxiety, and it's difficult, and it's, you know, you're kind of like out in the Wild West with like no structure or guarantees. But when you get good at it, actually, like it's pretty fun. Like, and it's actually kind of like freeing, like to live that way, actually.
I mean, a lot of people that I work with, they're all self-taught, you know. So yeah, I think, and sort of this goes back to this. I mean, there's a book that I would highly recommend. It is called Interdisciplinarity by Andrew Barry and Georgina Baum. It traces the entire history of discipline, interdiscipline, and transdiscipline. And this is, I think, at the heart of the problem of learning, which is when you kind of internalize this idea that there's a discipline, it has its rules, which are all just made up conventions, because there's a political economy which shapes a discipline, right? But then even within a discipline, there is never an agreement. They are constantly in a state of flux.
Right.
Right. So, however, when we use the term interdiscipline, you know, that I'm interdisciplinary, what that essentially means is you, a sociologist, me, a designer, say a third person, a technologist, we'll work together, but I'll go back and I'll do the same thing that I was doing. It doesn't change my, there is no kind of ontological turn in my knowledge.
Right.
Right. And this is the whole point. And this goes back to the physicist Baum. So Baum had engaged with the sort of Indian philosopher Jiddu Krishnamurti. There's a book of his called On Dialogue. This is again a must read. You know, he talks about what exactly is the difference between discussion and dialogue, and it's quite interesting. A lot of these have been in practice in the industry. which is transdisciplinarity. So a transdisciplinarity is that there is no discipline. We all have a shared understanding of things, and we constantly keep reforming our kind of understanding. Right. So discipline as an idea is an artificial boundary, which serves very specific functions, whether it is status, power, that industry, etc., etc. Right. So that comes from that old command and control structure, you see. Right. And this is what we are witnessing with AI, is that it's kind of this self-learning. It isn't just one set of rules, isn't it? It is self-learning. It is rethinking its own situation within a field or a given locus, and it is, in some instances, it is even creating its own language. Right. Now, look at any research grant application where they have an interdisciplinary team. Please tell me, please show me how their respective disciplines have transformed. They haven't. They're still the same. Right. So you had more playfulness, more kind of experimentation when people from academia went out into the industry and started playing around. So psychology, sort of anthropological techniques,
Right.
So these were kind of ideas coming from academia into the industry, and I think that after the 90s, I would say the 80s, when you had the cutting edge of ethnography, right, anthropology, and all those fields, semiotics kind of entered. But then after that, the academia has got nothing to offer.
Right.
So I think the well has dried.
And that's why you GTFO'd, as they say.
Exactly.
So that's great. That was a nice way to kind of put a bow on your perspective, at least. I think I have one final question, unless there was any. I didn't mean to cut you off. Was there anything else?
No.
Anything else on the tip of your tongue?
No, I think because you'll find these quite sort of interesting. We could talk about the obscenity of research grants. You had mentioned, didn't you, about lottery funding?
Oh, lottery funding, right. Well, I just see that as another data point in this kind of larger complex where kind of lefty, liberal, progressive, humanist institutions that seem like they have a really fluffy, happy face on them have these like weird alliances with like really brutal, cutthroat, regressive
absolutely
like submachines.
Yeah.
So like the lottery in the UK, I don't know how many people know this. Maybe it's obvious to me as a foreigner. I was like kind of struck by this, that a lot of the arts in the UK, like theaters and public institutions of art and culture, a lot of the funding comes from the lottery, which is well known to be a really regressive institution that literally moves money from the poor to the rich. So that's like what?
No, the best bit now is that the Arts Council now sort of insists that money for arts activities should have an academic input.
Oh, right.
Just go to look it up. This is the new kind of, so the coming together of artists and of academics is not leading to and using this dirty money, right? Basically, the poorest people,
right. Oh yeah, I remember on the phone you told me some stories about that, right?
So it's quite sort of interesting how this whole thing plays out. So to me it was. So you're right. I think kids need to read wider, farther, okay, and you need to find any way that you can to kind of read dangerous material. Don't be afraid.
Mm-hmm.
Fine. But read stuff, do not be out down by these labels of, oh, that's fascism, oh, that's this, that's that,
Right.
Go out, read more, read stuff
Definitely.
that is dangerous, look at, sort of engage in empiricism, something which we did quite sort of instinctively. You have to kind of ask those questions, didn't you?
Right. Well, I definitely agree with that for sure. Yeah.
And also be transdisciplinary, which is what the original sort of Oxbridge was. I mean, to me, it was I still remember my first trip when after I'd come to the UK. I said, okay, let's go to Oxford, to learn that vivas would last days upon end, where you'd be quizzed, where you'd have, it was literally like a court, And now, of course, now you're lefty in trying to justify all these exploitative systems will say, well, that was only for the elites, you see. This is the game they'll play, and completely diluting the point, which is that, look, that was a mode of inquiry, right? You had a solid understanding, so you approached the world not only from purely physical terms, but from metaphysical terms, So now we have. I was talking to someone who's was done metaphysics. I said, shall we talk about logic? And he did not want to have anything to do with logic. So to him it was, oh, that is, oh, so you want to be a logician, is it? So you want to be a positivist? No. We have to sort of ascertain statements. This was the point made by Baum on Dialogue. The whole thesis is right there on page 1. Right? It's there, and it says one thing: we approach a discussion not from a point of view of winning an argument. We make, and this comes from classical Indian kind of traditions of the argumentation. So you don't argue, you don't have a discussion. You make explicit your assumptions, and then when you sort of interrogate your opponent's statements, you first list out what you think his assumptions are,
right?
And you list out what you think he's trying to say, and you're supposed to discard any kind of erroneous assumptions,
right?
So you're supposed to kind of advance knowledge, right? What we have today is essentially tribal behavior. Right? Everything is conducted in bad faith. If you vote for Brexit, then you are a Nazi. That's it. You're done.
Right.
So so I think there's now how do you do this? I have no idea.
Right. But that's okay. You don't have to have all the answers, but
look for the right tutors. That's what I would say.
Well, that's good. Good to end on a very practical note. I think I have one final question for you, if you don't mind, and it's, you recently just basically made your final break from academia, and I'm just curious, how do you feel? Does it feel good? Do you feel like 100% just better, and like it's definitely, without a doubt, unambiguously like the right thing for you, or do you have mixed emotions, or are you maybe unsure?
Well, I guess we all. I'm a big fan of psychoanalysis. So there's always a symptom,
Yeah, right.
And I don't fight the symptom. I would love to sort of enjoy the symptom, which is to say that yes, there is a sense of that loss of the inquiry kind of mind. And as you said, it is a luxury to be away, just to be able to think ideas, and that benefited my daughter, because I could pour all that onto her. So I have fond memories. My employers were great. I had a lot of freedom. I could teach what I felt like. When I created interesting courses, my students won five international sort of awards. So I have no regrets. I have no regrets in terms of not publishing, because I think, as we've discussed, I have no love for that scam.
Yeah.
But I do miss the teaching part.
Okay. Sure.
Not because it sort of gave me status, no, because I think there is a certain, and there is a cultural kind of element coming from India. We kind of play, we sort of place a lot of emphasis on teaching. It is considered to be a privilege.
Right.
So it's something which I kind of miss. But I guess I'll sort of get used to it if I'm making enough money.
Right. Well, do you enjoy the business life? Do you enjoy that kind of?
Because I'm with some fantastic people. You should have Paul and Danny on your show.
Okay. Yeah. Email me about it. I'm happy to talk with anyone who's comes recommended.
But definitely Paul. Paul is, I would say, one of the cleverest people I've met.
Interesting. Okay.
His knowledge of both the left and the right. Very few people I know who have read texts on both the sides.
Right. Sure.
And I mean, I kind of we all grew up in a system where we were never kind of even, where no one even mentioned certain texts. Oh, you have to read only these, right? So it was quite interesting to see someone who has that exposure. So I'm pleased with the company I keep. So in that sense, I don't think I've lost much.
Right. Good. Yeah. I mean, the way I think about it, because I'm kind of exploring my options. As I've kind of mentioned to you, I think I'm looking outward. I'm not in any rush to leave, but I like the current place where I'm at, where I don't feel locked into academia, and I'm flirting with other possible pathways. But the good thing about it is I can kind of hang out in this job as long as I want, really.
But you see, because of me not paying sort of attention to the sort of echo chamber, that I could find someone like you.
Yeah.
And I've called you the sort of the next Zizek. And I think it's a mantle that you should carry.
Well, it's very kind of you.
Has lost the plot a bit.
I think that'll be one of the many things that we probably would enjoy talking about, but didn't get to this time around. But there's always too much to talk about, so that's all right. We'll add that to the list. If we'll do this again sometime, and we'll add that to the list for next time.
Yes,
it's been 2 hours now, so
wow.
I hope you found this edifying. I certainly did.
I think this was cathartic.
Good.
And it's always a pleasure sort of interacting with you, following you.
Thank you. And no, you're a pleasure to speak with. I really appreciate it.
And I hope your students sort of appreciate what they have.
Dude, actually, I have to tell you a quick anecdote that's hilarious that I think you're going to really appreciate, and it's very apropos of our conversation. Students, like, I don't know what the lecture halls are like in your experience. I don't know if this is unique to Southampton or what, but there's like a crisis of attendance. Like, students do not come to class very much at all. It's kind of horrifying, actually. It's like they just don't come. It's like across the board, they just don't come. It's like a very small number of people in the classroom on a daily basis. Anyway, with that as context, these kids don't show up to class for the most part. They can't be bothered to show up to class for the most part. I'm walking down the street last night with my buddy. We're walking to the shop actually to pick up some beers, and we walk by this pub, and I hear a young man's voice yell out, and he says, "Hey, are you Justin Murphy?" I was like, "Yeah. Why? What's up?" He's like, "When's the podcast with Nick Land coming out?" And I was like, who are you? Like, what? I introduced myself. I was a shook Santa or whatever. I was like, he's like, "I'm a student at the university." He's like, "I've just been, I follow you online, and I'm just curious when the podcast is coming out. I'm looking forward to listening to it." And so it's like, the stuff I'm doing now is actually like this stuff is actually connecting with students in like a really passionate way I mean, obviously not all of them, but a small number of them are like really on board with and really invested and enthusiastically involved with this form of, I guess, education or whatever you want to call it, if that's how they see it. And but like the education I'm getting paid to do for them, they're generally like not all there for it, you know. So it's like it's very fascinating. I thought that was a very fascinating little anecdotal experience.
Well, I think that is the empirical sort of evidence that what they're paying for, they don't appreciate, right? So I think that's a fantastic note to kind of end on, because for me, that's the proof that the systems it is that the steam engine without the governor.
Right. Interesting. That's
so
wait, yeah. Wait, what is the steam engine?
So the whole point about the steam's the engine. I mean at least the the Victorians knew the destructive nature of technology.
Right.
And so as the steam engine was developed, there was always this fear that it would sort of accelerate, and then you couldn't control the the engine. So there was always a governor which controlled the the engine.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So while with digital technologies, there is no governor. Right.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. I like that a lot. I mean, that's like because I'm kind of on a tear right now. Like I'm kind of at summer, so I'm sort of like all of a sudden I find myself just kind of on a roll and kind of really enthusiastically motivated on all this like creative, wacky internet stuff that I'm doing. And now I'm kind of doing this stuff like full time. I'm doing it like all day, almost every day. I'm like writing blog posts and writing, making videos and promoting the videos and stuff like this. Like this autonomous like internet platform that I'm like fucking around with is like now consuming me fully. But so it's actually a lot of work. I'm actually like almost overworking with all this stuff. But it's just like you said, there's no fucking rules. There's no governor. And so I can actually work really hard and it feels good. It's fun. It's like, it's me firing on all cylinders in the way that I want to be with no one to tell me what to do. And that's like the ideal, So it's like your metaphor of how digital technology is basically taking the governor off of, the steam engine that is these legacy institutions. I can relate to that deeply. Like that metaphor actually resonates quite personally with me, because that is actually kind of how it feels. Like someone just let off my governor and I'm like shooting outward in every direction, and it's kind of wild, but it's good. It feels right.
You know what? Just sort of on that note, there's a friend of mine, Dr. Benway, 1960 or 69. I'll share his Twitter handle with.
Sure.
You should have him on.
Okay.
If you want to have a genuinely conservative view on things.
Okay.
Because I think what's happening here is that it would be fantastic, because you're kind of this left libertarian beast, aren't you? Right?
Sure. Yeah, basically.
Yeah. So while he's a conservative in the truest of the senses, okay, I'm kind of I'm this former leftist, now a conservative, in the truest sense that there are certain things that are worth conserving, because we are way over our heads with things, and we need to have a governor, right? I would like the governor back on, but I think he's again an autodidact and really an interesting perspective. So him and Paul, I think you should have them at some.
Okay, yeah, just put them in the email, and I'll definitely look into them, and I'd be happy to talk with people. Sure.
It was a pleasure, and please keep doing more of your stuff.
I'll do my best, and thank you for the encouragement and the kind words, and thank you for spending 2 solid hours with me hashing these things out. I really appreciate it.
Yes. Okay then.
All right, I'll be in touch with you, Kishore. Take it easy.
Thank you, man. Bye. How do I accept?
Did you find it? There you go. All right. All right, everyone. Thanks for hanging with me. As always, very grateful to be chilling with you. I hope you found some of that interesting. And I am pooped. I've had a long day, so I'm not going to stick around to shoot the breeze too much. I think I'm just going to wrap it up right there. As always, thanks for hanging with me. Tomorrow I'll be back on with, Linkola Wave, or also known as Storm King, talking about decelerationism. All right, everyone. Enjoy your night. I still need some cool, like, pithy exit line, slogan type of phrase that I say every time. That's like the cool thing that YouTubers do. I don't have one yet, but can't force these things, Something will emerge. Good night, everyone. Until next time.